Hi, everyone. My name is Jayla Head, and I'm a program coordinator here at Shatterproof. And thank you so much for joining our August webinar titled Building Resilient Futures, the Role of Collegiate Recovery Programs in Higher Education. So starting off with some housekeeping, this webinar will be recorded and a copy of the presentation will be available on the Georgia Recovers website. All of the attendees will be muted. And also, please use the Q&A panel on the bottom of your screen to ask any questions that you may have. The chat is also available for general commentary, but will not be moderated as closely. Also, our interpreter will remain spotlighted throughout the webinar. To adjust your view and see all of the speakers or the panelists, click View in the top right corner of your screen and then select Speaker or Gallery. Users can also select a side-by-side view. So our agenda includes the welcome and housekeeping, an overview of the Georgia Recovers campaign, our presentation, our Q&A portion, and then we'll wrap up the webinar. So starting off with a Georgia Recovers campaign overview. So Georgia Recovers is an evidence-based public health campaign aimed to reduce the prejudice and discrimination associated with substance use disorder in Georgia. And so this campaign is brought to you by the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities and builds off of the pivotal work of the Georgia Council for Recovery. So our goals and objectives include increasing knowledge about substance use disorder and about recovery, and that recovery is not only possible, but probable. We want to improve attitudes towards those living with and or in recovery from substance use disorder, and strengthen the capacity of stakeholders, including organizations and individuals that are already responding to the crisis. So we have 3 pillars of work, including community connection, story sharing, and education. So community connection includes connecting with community organizations across the state, as well as leveraging our Community Impact Committee, which helps to guide the direction of the campaign. Story sharing also includes collecting stories of recovery and allyship, and these stories are shared across our social media channels. And education. So our campaign seeks to change attitudes by promoting messaging that speaks to hope and recovery, and also hosting monthly webinars that shed light on topics related to substance use disorder. So a few campaign updates. So we are currently accepting stories. There is so much power in storytelling, and we really want to leverage the lived experiences of people in recovery, their friends, families, allies, in order to change the narrative around addiction. And so Ashley is going to go ahead and drop the link to our story sharing interest form so we can hop on a call and learn more about our story collection process. Also, our nominations are open for our advisory committee, which is the Community Impact Committee. And so our CIC is comprised of community leaders, and they really help to guide the campaign and provide ongoing feedback. And so our nomination window will close next week, August 28th. So please go ahead and submit your nomination forms, and also share with your networks or anyone that may be interested. Also connect with us on social media. So here we have our Instagram and Facebook handles. We are really trying to increase our followers on Instagram to really increase our reach. So please help us to get to 250 followers on Instagram. And also, if you are interested in becoming an official campaign partner, please fill out our community partner form. And Ashley will also drop that in the chat for accessibility as well. So moving on to our speaker introduction. So Blake Schneider serves as the director of the Center for Young Adult Addiction and Recovery at Kennesaw State University. Mr. Schneider received his master's in communication studies from the University of Alabama with an emphasis in group leadership, strategic intervention, and social work. As a former professor of public speaking, Schneider presents at local, state, and national conferences, summits, and workshops. He currently assists in a consulting capacity for the Association of Recovery in Higher Education, providing technical assistance to collegiate recovery programs. His goals include advancing the center's impact on addiction and recovery locally and amongst the field, making collegiate recovery accessible and open to all students that seek support, minimizing risk for students through innovative alcohol and other drug education prevention measures, and ensuring the center's continued contributions to the field of recovery science research. In his free time, Schneider likes to spend time with his dogs, discovering new music, traveling, exercising, meditating, and working with mentees from a 12-step fellowship. So I will go ahead and pass it to you, Blake. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. Very grateful to be here and spend some time with y'all today for this webinar. I'm going to share my screen really quick. Cool. All righty. So I think the technology is set and everything is good to go. Again, very grateful to spend some time with y'all. My name is Blake Schneider. I'm the director of the Center for Young Adult Addiction and Recovery at Kennesaw State University. And I'm really grateful to Georgia Recovers and Shatterproof for asking me to hop in and speak on this topic. Just a little bit of personal background before I really dive in. I was born and raised here in Georgia. I went to school at Alabama and I sought treatment for myself when I was 19 years old. And when I was graduating from treatment, they recommended that I not go back to school. And being the infinitely wise 19-year-old that I was, I did decide to go back to school in Alabama, and I did it without a collegiate recovery program for a year, and that experience was vastly different than when the collegiate recovery program started at the University of Alabama. From there, I was a student in that program for 3 years, and then I started the program at Mississippi State in 2015, and then jumped over to Kennesaw State in January 2022. So all of that to say, my personal and professional life has really been consumed and centered around this idea of collegiate recovery, as a student and as a staff member. So I'm really grateful to be able to share my experience and my knowledge. And, it's certainly a very niche field, and it's something that I think is really critical when we talk about providing supports to, a niche cohort of individuals and letting folks know that recovery is probable and not only possible. So a quick overview of what we are going to look at today. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about collegiate recovery, what it can look like on a college campus. I do want to review the history and kind of underscore the importance, just in the sense of helping justify and make meaning of why it is really important to have on a college campus and kind of some of those outcomes. As well, I will share the national kind of standards and recommendations for what it looks like in building a collegiate recovery community or participating in a collegiate recovery community. For reference, before I forget, the National Professional Organization for Collegiate Recovery is the Association of Recovery in Higher Education, which is the ARHE. It's not the best acronym, but here we are. So I'll share that, and then I'll share a little bit more in depth of what our program looks like here at Kennesaw State. I do want to dig into a little bit of peer-to-peer recovery support, prevention awareness, and then talk a little bit about other programs that are available nationwide, have some resources, and then open it up at the end for some questions and answers. So when we look at collegiate recovery from a historical perspective, especially in the setting of higher education. We are kind of the new kids on the block. We haven't been around terribly long. So the first program started in 1977. When you think about a dean of students office or housing or even academic programs, they've been around as long as time. And so collegiate recovery is a fairly new and emerging phenomenon within the field of higher education. The program that started in 1986 was Texas Tech University, and they really have been the flagship institution for the collegiate recovery movement for quite some time, and had a replication model and have provided a lot of assistance for other folks starting collegiate recovery programs. That to say, from 1986 until the early to mid 2000s, there were really only a handful of collegiate recovery programs. And around 2010 or so, we got a little bit more recognition as a field from the ONDCP, and also at a federal level with SAMHSA and those sorts of good places. And they really began to advocate on our behalf and the importance of the work that we do. And so there was really a big blossom in the early 2010s. And so we've seen quite the growth in collegiate recovery over the past few years. And it's interesting, having been in this field for more than 10 years since I've been around, to witness all of that change. And since it is fairly new, it doesn't take a ton of time to become an expert matter on the subject or on the content that we're covering today. At least that's my humble opinion. But that to say, we've had humble beginnings. It is a fairly new and emerging field, and it is really exciting to see collegiate recovery programs adopted and started at other universities. And I'm sure that I'm probably preaching to the choir when it comes to providing support for niche populations and individuals in recovery. But from a higher education perspective, it's really important that we justify the work that we do, and that we have the data and the evidence to back that up. And so for our purposes, collegiate recovery is really focused on that niche population of students who are in recovery and either returning to school or staying in school. And in light of all of the individuals that we lose every year, it really shouldn't be viewed as an optional support, but more so a cornerstone resource on campus. And that's something that we're certainly working towards as a field. If you think about, again, dean of students, counseling, sports and rec, whatever that may look like, those are kind of seen as mainstays on campus, and collegiate recovery is working its way towards that, so that we can justify our presence and hopefully be on every college campus across the nation and across the world. Some evidence to kind of back up the importance of collegiate recovery and some of the outcomes that we see. So the first thing that we're looking at with this slide is a typical addiction career. And I'm not going to run through all of these numbers verbatim, but in a typical addiction center, we see that the first use of drink and drug is around 14 to 15. The age of first treatment is normally 31, and the normal average stable age of recovery is 41. So the loss to that individual is about 16 years of active use and about 10 years of cycling. Now, when we look at that from a collegiate recovery perspective, the first age of drink and drug is around 16 to 17. The consequences tend to arrive a little bit later for that population. The age of first treatment is around 21, and the age of stable recovery is 26. So if we're doing what we do and we do it well, we can successfully reduce the recovery and recurrence of use cycle by 15 years, and we're producing educated citizens. And I think one of the most valuable things with collegiate recovery is it's really that long-term, ongoing, continuing care. And so we can provide that service for an individual if they're coming in as a freshman, as a transfer student, whatever that may look like. And so while providing recovery supports, we're also providing the opportunity for an individual to acquire a degree, which hopefully the objective of that is for them to have agency and to have purpose in their life. And so by way of that, we found really successful outcomes and measures when it comes to producing individuals that have agency, that have the ability to share their story, that know what their purpose and their passion in life is. So I always like to start off with those slides to kind of demonstrate just the human capital impact that collegiate recovery can have on our population and how it can help individuals find recovery sooner. Next, I wanted to give an overview of the current best practices and standards as recommended by the ARHE, which again is the Association of Recovery in Higher Education. And these were actually released earlier this year, so they were updated just a little bit from what they had been for the past previous years. But these are kind of the main ingredients that come into having a collegiate recovery program. And one kind of point of clarification is that a CRP is a collegiate recovery program, and a CRC is a collegiate recovery community. And so the CRC really speaks to that peer-to-peer support model and the peers who are in that community. And the collegiate recovery program is more so the departmental or the staff level that houses those students. So the first standard is that CRPs embrace that recovery from substance use disorder is an individualized, intentional, dynamic, and relational process involving sustained efforts to improve wellness. So we work with students in order to make sure that they are living healthier lifestyles, that we are supporting their journey, that we are helping them find their identity and getting them plugged into the right groups on campus. So that first part is really boils down to supporting an individual's recovery. The second part is having a dedicated physical space for students in recovery to gather and support one another. And this is a question that I get oftentimes in the work that I do of how do we justify getting a building if we don't have students, or what if we get students and then we don't have a building or we don't have space for them? And it's kind of the chicken or the egg argument. But in my opinion, if you build it, they will come. So that to say, dedicated space has been indicated as one of the most, if not the most important indicators of a successful collegiate recovery program. And again, I know the audience is probably fairly diverse today, and I don't know if there are any folks who are actually at a college campus, but brick and mortar is worth its weight in gold on a college campus. So it's always something that's a little bit, can be a roadblock to starting a program. However, a lot of collegiate recovery programs find their home with shared space with other individuals. They get a suite of rooms. Doesn't always have to be a whole building. So, but all of that to say that is vitally important for students to know that they have a safe space that they can come to, that there's free printing, there's free coffee, they can come see their peers, and even just to get away, because you never know what is going to offset a student on campus, if they're going to feel uncomfortable, if they're going to be offered anything. So having that safe space is really critical for a collegiate recovery program. The next point, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the difference between CRPs and CRCs. So in my mind, the most important thing that we can do is put peers together, right? Like my most important job is to get like-minded students together so that they can support one another, share their journey, share their experience, provide that mentoring, that peer-to-peer support. And that's really where the magic happens. Beyond that, though, it's important that we as administrators provide programmatic support to help support students in maintaining and protecting the recovery. And there's a variety of different ways that we can do that. And I'll actually speak a little bit more to the programming and engagement on the next slide. This is my soapbox moment of the entire webinar, but CRPs have paid, trained, qualified, and ethical, dedicated professionals who support students in recovery. So a lot of times I see programs start up and they have a part-time worker or they have a graduate assistant to help assist those efforts. And I, for one, could not live without student assistants or temporary workers. That to say, it does create somewhat of a start and stop cycle with those programs. If someone's coming in and leaving, and there's kind of that cycle, it's very difficult for those students in that cohort to build continuity and to have that individual who's really driving the charge and helping bring folks together. So having a paid staff member is really vital in the work that we do. And there are millions of different ways of which to go about it, whether be grant money or private donation money, or if it can be written in by someone who is savvy and knows how college budgets work. But having a paid staff member is really critical to the work that we do. CRPs are nonprofit entities, so everything that we do is for free. We don't charge for our services, and that's always very interesting when talking to prospective students or parents. They're like, how much does this cost? And you're like, it's free to come hang out and participate in these different events that we have. And I can speak a little bit to that because there are some things that do have a cost associated, but it's something that we otherwise would not be able to work around if it's like housing or something like that. It's critical that we are housed within institutions of higher learning or higher education that confer degrees, whether that be associates, bachelor's, master's, etc. We identify with and collaborate with on-campus and off-campus partners and stakeholders. So I'm a big believer that anything we do, as long as we do it together, will be stronger and we will be better. And so our net worth is directly proportional to our network, and some of the most dynamic and fulfilling programming that we can execute is with the help of our peers, whether they are on campus or off campus. And the last recommendation is that students or CRPs actively cultivate an environment of belonging which honors the whole student. And so it's really important, and this kind of goes back to that safe space, but not so much the physical space, but that students feel honored in their journey, and that we as staff members and as a community really help them have that place and that space on campus where they fit in, where they feel comfortable, where they can share their successes, where they can share their struggles, and that we honor what it is for them to be that individual and connect them with the appropriate resources, right? So if you have a student who is a veteran, or if you have a student who is experiencing food insecurity, that you make sure that you honor all aspects of that individual and not just their recovery. So next, I wanted to share a little bit more about the programming and engagement that can normally be found in the Collegiate Recovery Program, to give you all an idea of what it looks like on a college campus. And this isn't universal across the board. Every Collegiate Recovery Program is a little bit different, but I can run through kind of what it looks like here at Kennesaw State. So the very first point is community, 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 and I bolded that and underlined it and italicized it, because again, I think community is the most important thing that we provide to students, because it's one thing for me to make a suggestion to a student of, talking to a professor or working on their recovery or whatever that may look like, but when they hear it from their peers, they're normally going to listen a little bit more than they would to me. At least that's been my experience. So having that community, having students who can come together and become fast friends and support one another in this, fairly unique journey is really critical. I talked about the safe space on campus, having somewhere where students can come and gather, and they know that their language is going to be spoken and that they are going to be heard, is really critical. Scholarships are an aspect that a lot of programs offer. And it's always something that's really interesting of when I'm sharing with, again, a prospective student or a prospective parent that we have scholarships that students can apply for. It's always this kind of mind boggling, like, oh, I can get a scholarship for being a part of this program. And at least for Kennesaw State and for a lot of other programs I know of, that answer is yes. Um, and so just a little bit of my journey. I had been at the University of Alabama for a year before the Collegiate Recovery Program started there. And they approached me and they're like, hey, you should join the Collegiate Recovery Program. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, it sounds a little bit, no, thank you. But they're like, we'll give you a scholarship if you sign up. And I was like, sign me up. And that is what got me in the door as a student. Here at Kennesaw State, we have a fairly large cohort. So we have about 55 students who have more than 6 months of sustained recovery, and about 10 or 15 who have less than 6 months, or kind of evaluating what their relationship with addiction and recovery looks like. All that to say, we dispersed $50,000 worth of scholarships our last academic year. And it looks like we're going to disperse about $40,000 worth of academic scholarships this year. The study space and study hours, and again, that comes back to that physical space, but it's really interesting to see the ebb and flow of student traffic here in the center. Normally, I mean, they're in and out all the time, but right around finals and midterms, we'll have students hunkering down and using our computers and using our printing. But I do think it's really critical that we provide that, because at the end of the day, we provide that addiction and recovery support, but students are here to get degrees. And so anything that we can do to support that is really, really vital. Another aspect of that academic support that we provide is academic advising. And so we have staff members who have access to student records and their class schedules, and their degree courseworks and the courses that they need in order to graduate. And so for us, they will meet with their academic advisor who's specific to their college. And then they will meet with us after that meeting, so we can look at the courses that they need to take, and then we can make sure that they don't have to choose either recovery or academics, and they can fit their class schedule in order to fit their recovery schedule. And so that's really critical, so that the programming that we offer is utilized by our students and they don't feel like they're missing out because they have to go to class or anything like that. A part of that as well is recovery coaching. And so for our students, they have to do individualized recovery check-in plans. And that's where they look at kind of where the recovery's at, any goal setting that they have this semester, what they're going to do to maintain their recovery, things of which we can hold them accountable for if they would like, so on and so forth. And so we provide that coaching to make sure that we are holding students accountable, and also just making sure that we're helping them reach their goals and helping them achieve everything they want to achieve in their time with us as a student. We do offer recovery housing at Kennesaw State, and a lot of programs offer recovery housing as well. And that's one of those things where it's not free because they have to pay for housing, but otherwise they would have to pay for housing regardless. But it does offer a safe space for students who are part of our program to live together, work together, study together. So really that living, learning community, so that their entire college experience can really be encapsulated from that recovery protective lens. That to say, it's always really interesting when I talk to schools that are emerging that want to start a collegiate recovery program. A lot of times they want to start off with housing for students who are in recovery. And I think it's a great and wonderful ideal, and it's really important, and it's a critical service that we can provide. That to say, it's fairly nuanced when you put folks together and they're living together. So my recommendation is always to build the community and to build the program first, and then bring in housing. But from a higher education perspective that housing, living, learning, community checks a lot of boxes for folks. So I think when individuals are starting programs, that's kind of a natural thing to look at first. Connections on campus, and again, this kind of goes back to collaborating with stakeholders on and off campus, and honoring the whole student. But one of the best things that we can provide as staff members on campus is if a student is worried about financial aid or a meal plan or parking or any of the myriad of things of which they could be faced with. It's really always very helpful that we have a person that we can refer them to where it's like, hey, this is my person, reach out to them. And then, you know, by the way, I'm sending you a student kind of thing, really makes the college experience for an individual in recovery less daunting. So it's one of the most impactful things that we can do. Sober social events. So, you know, it's not the norm for, or at least, you know, in my mind, it's not always the norm for individuals to be in recovery and to be abstaining from any sort of addictive behaviors on campus. And so anything we can do to normalize that experience by throwing events is a wonderful way of which for our students who are in our cohort to feel honored and to feel like they're having that college experience. And there's a multitude of different ways of which you can execute this, whether it's alternative programming, whether it's sober tailgates, whether it's educational events out in the open, whether it's, you know, opportunities to do things off campus, if it's like bowling, whatever that may look like. But those events are really when folks can come together and have fun, do some team building and connecting with their peers. And if for us, we do a fair amount of alternative programming. And so we have open mic nights on Halloween and for Halloween and 420, because we know that those are normally high drinking and high use times. So those alternative events kind of fall into those sober social events as well. Another aspect or another programming element that can be included is service opportunities. And that's one that I certainly really appreciate in the sense that, you know, we still face stigma on and off campus all the time. And so when we have a group of students, we can encourage them to get involved on campus, whether it's giving days or an organization, whatever that may look like. And it really demonstrates to folks, whether they're on campus or off campus, that our students are here, that our students are successful, that they're going to class, that they're studying, and that they're productive members of society. And so I think that's a really wonderful way of which collegiate recovery programs and students can give back to the institution and the community that is supporting them. There are various amount of retreats and conferences that students can attend and that a lot of collegiate recovery programs engage in. I will say, and I'm certainly biased because I've been in the Southeast for my entire career, but the Southeast really has a strong network of schools that are really collaborative and get together fairly frequently. But we have a fall retreat where we get together and connect with other students who are in collegiate recovery programs. And then we have a spring summit, which is rotating and hosted at a different university. And that's an opportunity for staff and students to get together and kind of celebrate collegiate recovery and learn a little bit more about the latest and greatest in any emerging trends that we are seeing. And we have a national conference, which is hosted by the Association of Recovery in Higher Education. Again, that's a little bit more educationally focused, but what we have found in working with students is there's kind of this, you know, initial like, you know, oh my gosh, there's people on campus who speak my language and who have similar or shared experiences to me. And then the next, like, kind of peeling back the layer of that is when you travel and when you meet other students who are in other programs, so like, oh, I'm a part of something bigger than myself, and they have this kind of support at other universities or institutions. And so that's always really, you know, a great way to show students that collegiate recovery and just recovery in general is not happening just in a vacuum of where they are. Community events. So at least for us, we have community events at least twice a month where we get together and share a family style meal and have a speaker and just provide that opportunity for students to connect with one another. So a little bit more inwardly facing, where our larger group of individuals can connect with one another. And this can look a variety of different ways on a variety of different campuses. And then seminar is really the heart and soul of what we do. So for us, it's staff led, and we have 6 a week, and it's where we have those kind of micro communities of 10 to 12 students. And we're pretty adamant at capping it at that. And so that's where students can meet with one another, hold one another accountable. And for us, we have different domains that we look at in the spirit of helping students develop agency, whether that be health and wellness, interpersonal relationships, intrapersonal relationships, existential, whatever that may be. But we focus on those areas to really equip students to be as balanced and as healthy as possible in our time with us. And so the different areas of support, which I kind of covered through all of the programming and engagement, is recovery, academic, social, financial, family, and career. So the family and career piece, is any communications or any support we can provide to family members or our students interacting with their families, and also career in the sense of if a student is graduating in a certain field and we have connections, doing our best to help them with that outreach and engagement. So for us, I wanted to talk a little bit about what collegiate recovery looks like here at Kennesaw State University. And I went really in depth with our collegiate recovery program and all the programming that we provide. But we do have 2 other sides of the house that I wanted to speak about really quick. So we have our education and outreach side of the house. And so for us, we really look at a recovery informed lens and how we can support students and educate students from a holistic perspective. So we have workshops, trainings, campus-wide events, alternative programming, student volunteering opportunities. Here we provide naloxone training, recovery ally training. We also participate in mental health first aid. For any students who encounter a conduct violation on campus, they can either see our clinician, or they will come to a 3-hour wise choices workshop where they just learn a little bit more about their relationship with whatever addictive process it might be that they are currently engaging with. We have a lot of campus-wide events that are more so our educational awareness outside of our 4 walls events, and that can be anything from cannabis education to Red Ribbon Week to National Love Your Body Week. A variety of different ways of which we try to educate the college campus population about recovery and addiction, and knowing that there is a safe space on campus where they can come if they do need to process with us. And at least for us at Kennesaw State, we really stay away from the scare tactics of like, if you drink, you're going to go blind or whatever that looks like. But we really try to look at the cause of why a student or an individual might be using. Right. So it's not so much focused on drinking or using or don't do that, but it's more so like, if you're drinking, using, participating in addictive behaviors, there's something underneath that. So what is it that's underneath that, and how can we help support you in that way? 2 other points that I wanted to touch on with our collegiate recovery program is we do have a Discover Recovery program for individuals who are in that 0 days to 6 month population. And that's more of a transient community where individuals can come in and learn a little bit more about recovery and kind of in a very non-threatening setting can kind of question their relationship with any sort of addiction or recovery that they are encountering. And then we also offer an education abroad opportunity. So this past spring, we took 13 students to Montepulciano, Italy, and Rome, Italy. I've never counted to 13 so many times in my life. But those are really wonderful and fulfilling experience to be able to provide the opportunity for students to travel internationally when they would not have otherwise, out of just the fear that comes to traveling internationally and protecting your recovery. The last side of our house, and certainly not the least, is our research arm of things. And so for us, we really look at program assessment. We look at the efficacy of what we're doing, and making sure that the services that we are providing are effective and that students are responding to them. And that really helps inform the work that we do, not only with our students in the Collegiate Recovery Program, but also from an education and outreach perspective as well. We're involved in a few national projects looking at collegiate recovery and looking at different measures of what makes this niche field successful. But overarchingly, for us, we're really dedicated to studying recovery and collecting data on recovery itself. So, I think for years and years and years, we really looked at addiction and studied the how and the why of addiction. And for us, we want to look at the how and the why of recovery, and what makes recovery not possible, but probable. So that's what our research side of the house looks like. And I think I've talked about this a fair deal with the community aspect, but I did want to kind of drill down on the peer-to-peer recovery support and how effective that is. So peer support is affirmed as the most important recovery support for students, regardless of the recovery typology. Again, it goes back to that shared lived experience where students can relate, and they can not only share that they might be encountering some hurdles with their recovery, but also like classes too, right? It's a really unique thing when it's like, oh, this person, talks my language and understands my recovery journey, but they also understand what it's like if I'm having difficulty writing a paper or interacting with a professor or whatever that may look like. Something we also see with this is that students who are in recovery typically don't utilize the traditional supports that are available, whether it's a counseling center, health promotion, or anything like that. And that in no way is to speak bad or belittle the work that our near and peer folks do on our college campus, but it's just a really niche population. And again, having that shared language, I think, is really critical for students to come in, to get plugged in, and to be able to thrive in a community on campus. I'm almost to time. I believe I have 3 more minutes, so I will be fairly quick. But we do have education and prevention that I kind of touched on briefly on our college campus. And again, for any audience members out there, education and prevention from my perspective is really critical in the sense that it supports all students and it educates all students. So any learning outcomes that we put together, any goals or objectives that we put together, supports the entire campus community, which is really critical, not only from a justification perspective from our side of things, that we are the experts on addiction and recovery, and so it makes sense for us to provide this education, but also that it's a critical need and it's a vital service that impacts all students. So while we provide a high level support to a niche cohort of students, we're also able to interact with the entire campus population. And ultimately, if we do what we do well, it creates a recovery-friendly campus. And so students, whether they're in recovery or not, can have an understanding of what recovery looks like. They can be supportive of their peers. They can use non-stigmatizing language, all of that good stuff. And then I have a few statistics here. We trained approximately 380 people in the use of naloxone in the past year. And we give that away for free. The training is free. And we also educate folks on medical amnesty laws here in Georgia, which I think is really helpful. And this also kind of demonstrates the last bullet point demonstrates the amount of students that we're able to impact through our education and prevention. And so, at least for me, when I'm making my case, it's really important for me to say, not only are we, impacting these 70 students at a really high level, but we're also educating, these 3,000 plus students about addiction and recovery. I know I'm almost to time, and I will apologize because this is not the best graphic, but this is the most up-to-date graphic that I could find and that is available as far as I know. But this is kind of a look at what collegiate recovery looks like nationwide on a map. As you can see, it's really more saturated in the east and the southeast, the kind of mid-Atlantic region. There are a few schools on the west coast, mainly in like California, Oregon and Washington, but there's a fair amount of schools that we have not connected yet with in the kind of the West and the Midwest and the Southwest. So my job will never be done. There will always be work to be had. That to say, one thing that's not included on this map is there is a collegiate recovery program in Canada and the United Kingdom. So really cool to know that we are going abroad and across the waters and helping students who are not in the United States as well. And then lastly, I wanted to just share a little bit of resources, at least how I see them. So for anyone who's considering going to college or has an individual that is in recovery and wants to go to college, I listed a few different departments that might be good to connect with if it isn't readily apparent that there is a collegiate recovery program there, whether that be admissions, whether that be dean of students, parent and family offices, any of the various iterations of folks that are listed there should be able to point individuals in the right direction when it comes to what sort of collegiate recovery or recovery supportive programming there is on a campus. And then off campus, of course, RCOs, recovery high schools, peer support groups, alumni, whatever that may look like. And alumni meaning alumni of collegiate recovery programs who can direct someone who's considering going to college in the right direction and can share what their experiences looked like. There's also a book that is available on the ARHE's website, and I listed their website. So if you're interested in collegiate recovery, want to know more, have someone that you want to send, you can go there and look at the directory, see what schools are out there. Also listed the website for the Georgia Council for Recovery, Shatterproof, and recovery schools, so that the information regarding recovery high schools was available as well. So I've talked enough. That is my spiel about collegiate recovery. And now I think we're going to transition to question and answer. But thank you all for letting me share a little bit more about collegiate recovery.
Yes, thank you so much, Blake, for your presentation. So if we want to just transition into our Q&A portion, we did have a few questions come in our Q&A sector. So first and foremost, are you working with any Greek organizations on a local or national level? So including like chapters or headquarters?
That's a great question. We personally are at Kennesaw State, so it was kind of serendipitous how it happened, but 3 of our staff members are advisors for a fraternity here on campus. And so our first kind of charge with them is to help advise and make sure that their fraternity is running smoothly. But beyond that, we do coordinate with our Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life and make sure that students know that we have naloxone training available, that we have alternative events available. It's always an interesting department to connect with, or a group of students to connect with on campus. But I do think that it's really critical that they know that we're on campus and that we support them. I will say in my time at Mississippi State, I connected with a few different fraternities, and one of them actually did a fundraiser for us, which was just like a really cool kind of symbiotic relationship where they gave back to us. Another kind of note with that as well is we do have students who were part of a Greek organization and then come to us, and sometimes they elect to remain members of both. Sometimes they're done with Greek life, but more often than not, it's really helpful to have one of those students so that you can connect back to fraternity and sorority life if they're willing to kind of open that door for you.
Thank you for that response. Yeah, that's super interesting. In college, I was part of a Greek organization as well. And so, like, I didn't know, that these services could have been accessible. So, do you find this to be widespread, or is this something more new as, these services are being integrated with Greek life?
Um, from a Greek life perspective, I think it'd be difficult for me to speak at like a national level of like trends and the amount of success that collegiate recovery programs have with connecting with Greek life folks. Um, I will say that I know at least for us, like we're fairly intentional about the connections that we have on campus. But a lot of times when programs are emerging or starting, they kind of get in where they fit in, and anyone who's willing to share their story. And so there's instances for us where we've been involved in like the new member orientations, or we've been involved in going to speaking to different chapters. So it really just depends, I think, university by university. But just from my knowledge of colleagues in the field, I would say more often than not, individuals, staff members are trying to connect with Greek organizations. And I know I mentioned that we serve as advisors, and it's been a really cool symbiotic relationship where we like have our fraternity guys and they like come to our events and support us and share about the work that we do with their friends. So it's kind of a sneaky way that we've infiltrated fraternity and sorority life to try to get our message out there.
Thank you so much. And so moving on to our next question, what are some recent success stories of students who have participated in Kennesaw State University's recovery program?
Oh God. It's a really good question. I mean, this is kind of just like I don't want to say standard answer, but every semester at the end of the semester, we have a graduation celebration where we celebrate students graduating from the university and for being a part of our organization. And this past spring, I think we had 7 or 8 graduates, and that's always a really beautiful experience for them to get up on stage to share a little bit of their story, how they graduated, the next steps for them, the impact that we played in their lives. And we always invite the family members and friends as well as campus leadership and administration. And so it's always a really special event in that an individual's able to share about the success that they've had in their life and the next steps. And you have, their family members, and you also have higher up supporters on campus who are there to be a part of that, which is always a really wonderful experience. So graduating is, the first one that comes to mind. But I mean, we have students who have gone on to be lawyers and doctors and therapists. And we had a student who recently had an internship with, God, it wasn't the governor's office, but it was some sort of legislative office. And so that was really cool to see as well.
Thank you. So moving on to our next question. If someone has an organization or service that could appeal to collegiate recovery programs or collegiate recovery communities as a sober event, what is the best way to reach out, both in state or out of state?
So if an organization was wanting to partner with a collegiate recovery program, so I think the first thing that would come to mind would really be the location, and looking up and making sure that it was at the university that you wanted to do it at, and getting in contact with those people. And again, I think that the National Association of Recovery and Higher Education has a really good directory where folks can get plugged in. But then just connecting with the staff members and seeing what the capacity looks like, and seeing ways of which individuals can collaborate. I will say that that collaboration and that connection piece is really, with the staff member, is really critical, because every university kind of has its busy seasons and slow seasons. And so I can't think of a particular instance, but someone's like, hey, we want to come in and do this event on this day. And it's like, well, actually midterms are then, or, whatever that looks like. So how can we collaborate together and find the right time, place, location, all of that good stuff. So always really helpful to have someone on campus who can help navigate what that on-campus event or program may look like. But from an outreach perspective, I would say going on the website and looking at schools and then finding contact information from there.
Thank you. And that speaks to, you spoke about having like a hired worker like in these programs so that they can be liaisons between the campus community, but also that outreach perspective as well. So we have another question. So what are some of the considerations to look for when applying to collegiate recovery programs?
It's a really good question. So if anyone is, leaving high school, leaving treatment, I think it's really critical that individuals do the research and look at the school that is going to be the best fit for them. So of course, if they have the degree that they want, I think that's kind of your starting point to make sure that if you want to be an engineer, that they have an engineering program. So doing a little bit of research on that. And then beyond that, I would encourage folks to be really curious about the supports that are provided and the staff member and the implementation that's in place. And so at least for me, if I were a parent or if I were a high school counselor, whatever that may look like, I would really want to know if there was a space on campus. I would want to know if there's weekly programming. I would want to know if there's any sort of counseling or recovery coaching available. A lot of times folks want to know about recovery housing as well. A lot of times that can be a determining factor. And then beyond that, and it's certainly in no way to the level of college athletics, but in my time, I've had students who have stopped by, they're like, hey, I'm visiting this program and 5 other like collegiate recovery programs to see the best fit for me. And so if an individual can travel out and lay eyes on the space and the place and the person who is administering the program, I always really recommend that just to make sure that they would be a good fit for that program and that it has all of the programmatic elements and resources that they are looking for.
Thank you. And then we have time for one more question. So how can community members outside of higher education support local community recovery programs?
Local recovery community programs, collegiate recovery or local?
It's I think collegiate recovery program. So if you're outside of that higher ed sector. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. I think the number one thing that comes to mind is awareness. So, and I live and breathe this work, right? This is what I do for a living. This is my livelihood. But the amount of folks that I encounter when I tell them about the work that I do and the supports that we provide, more often than not, just the average person that I run into on the street does not know that there are collegiate recovery or recovery supports available at an institutional and a university level. And so when I say that, what comes to mind is I've gotten students in all sorts of random and crazy ways from a referral process standpoint of I've had students who were referred from parking before. I've had students referred from like neighbors before. And so I think helping with that awareness and letting folks know that these supports exist is really wonderful. One of my favorite stories, and I know we're almost at time, but we had a student who was part of our program, was in class, was talking about coming to the center and was talking with one of their classmates. And the classmate was like, oh, I think I might need that. And like came up to the center that day and like filled out like paperwork and got plugged into our program, which is just so cool. Of like, you never know who this program could support and benefit. And the next thing that really comes to mind for me is collaborating, working together. If there are any resources available in the community, any strategic connections that a collegiate recovery program could make, so if you're tuning in from Athens or if you're tuning in from Statesboro, whatever that looks like, if you know that there's a business that's recovery friendly, or they hire folks who are, you know, in recovery. Individuals who work in this space are friendly and wonderful and always want to connect. So if there are any resources or any strategic connections, that's the other thing that comes to mind as well.
Thank you so much, Blake. Really, thank you to everyone that also joined our August webinar. We're super excited to have you all, and please stay connected with us online. Ashley has dropped our link tree in the chat. And yes, we'll be looking forward to our next webinar. Thank you so much, Blake. And thank you, Aaron, as well, for your services. Bye.
Bye.